in all the president's bankers about this, and did, you know, that is the nonfiction book I've just came out with, is that there was a time where there was a kind of solidarity of what people needed for the economy to grow and what the government was willing to provide, and what they were willing to do to keep bankers accountable. There's always been close personal ties, personal connections, you know, same schools, same clubs, intermarriages, friendships, protege mentorship relationships between the White House and Wall Street. But there was a time in our past, and I think the hope is to look into it, between the 30s and the 70s, where at least, even though everyone, all the people in that equation wanted power, whether it was American power globally, politically, whether it was financial power globally from an economic and trade standpoint, they still were able to see the public good. They were still able to sort of walk and chew gum and see a public interest that could only be served if there was some restraint. If people, you know, went to jail if they committed fraud or crimes, if banks were made smaller or at least divided from the risks they could take if they took too much risk, and the government or society was on the hook for it. So there was a time when things were more stable, there was growth in the country for individuals, and these people still were able to make money. So the kind of hope lies in the past. The unfortunate thing is that, you know, from the 70s and 80s and certainly through on today, no matter who was in government, whether it was, you know, Republican, Democrat, you know, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, it doesn't matter, because those alliances with Wall Street have really been working towards the detriment of not just us, but also the world. And so we need to dial that back. There is an answer in our past, but there's also a very, very strong possibility if we don't look at that, if we don't try to be better than our past, not even like that aspect of our past, because it had problems, that we are going to suffer wider consequences. So there's some hope in that, but there's also a warning in that.
Again, I've been asking the questions. What else is on your radar?
You know, the worrisome thing, and we talked a little bit about it, you did ask this, so I'll just answer it again, is the Ukraine situation, only because it's being perceived as more of an ideological fight, a new Cold War, and so forth, when in fact it is really a financial fight. It's a globalization of financial fight, and it's who gets the calling rights to that particular part of the world. You know, Russia has been moving its banks into the Ukraine. European and American banks have kind of retreaded after the 2008 crash, and they're looking to come back into that area because it's a very good outpost to Eastern Europe. And so there's a lot of problems that could result in that. There's also problems that could result in what's happening in Asia with respect to additional speculation, and not so much, you know, China's growth or not growth and all the things that are headlined in the media, but what happens with the real speculation, where China is trying to really compete to some extent its banks with American and European banks, and, for example, expanding types of transactions and alliances with Latin America. We've seen that story play before in the 70s. You know, American banks went after Latin America, created a whole lot of debt in that situation. We had a third world debt crisis in the 1980s, which was the start of a tremendous amount of bailouts that we, you know, have manifested and just gone bigger since that period of time. And now I see that coming from this other side of the world. It's like the competition in finance and in globalized finance is to try and sort of soak all the rest of the countries from the standpoint of the countries that have more concentrated wealth or financial institutions, and then try to have the rest of the world.
Sure, you know, New York wants to be London. And then you've got, you know, Germany wanting to get, you know, to be the new London. And then just, it's like, who can whore themselves out the best? Who can devalue the currency the fastest while actuarying shutting down all your competition and small business so you can pump up your fraudulent balance sheet? I mean, it is a race to the bottom, as Ross Perot said.
And that's really the main worry, that you know, this race to the bottom, this idea of sort of plundering commodities or different types of local establishments as banks grow has been something that has been intrinsic, particularly since what I call the age of financial capitalism, which I think started 100 years ago with J.P. Morgan and the Fed, and sort of this idea that they would be backing to bad bets. And that idea has been really solid through all of what we've seen, all the negatives that we've seen with concentrated banks becoming bigger, with smaller banks getting eaten up, with concentrated businesses becoming bigger and smaller businesses getting eaten up or dying in the process. And the funds, the liquidity, the money that goes into these larger institutions gives them a bigger benefit as well, because if you're getting, for example, 0% money then you can do a lot of damage if you have no accountability to even the money that you're getting.
And then when they lose that money, it just gets bailed out on top of it.
Well, exactly. I mean, the fact that the Federal Reserve has a $4.2 trillion balance sheet, we are not in a time of war. We're not really in the time of any sort of physical, violent danger, for example, on our country, and yet the financial danger is so big that this is the largest amount of subsidies that the Federal Reserve has ever provided the largest banks in the history of its existence.
Well, look, this is done by design. It's the Japan route. Japan, as you know, is the test. 20 years of recession, depression, and they're doing all this on purpose, in my view. And there's a method to their madness. I think it's going to blow out of control and cause war and famine and revolution. They think they can ride that to even more police state, use the revolutions they cause as a way to have civil wars or internal police actions. I think that's the master plan. I want to ask you about that and talk some about your new book, On the Other Side with Nomi Prince. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. The goldsmiths, people don't want to carry their gold around, so you'd go in and they'd give you receipts that were good for business around the town that you could go redeem so you didn't get robbed. And then they would have your name and everything, and it really stopped criminals from knocking you over the head. But pretty soon, the goldsmiths started loaning out a lot more paper than they actually had gold. And that's where the Rothschilds came in and took over Europe. And it's the same story over and over again. People that can create fraudulent instruments can buy the courts, buy the police, and then pretty soon they take over everything. Nomi Prince, tell us about your book. I haven't read it yet. I've read 2 of your other nonfiction books. Tell us about your book and how folks get it.
It's called All the President's Bankers, The Hidden Alliances That Drive American Power. It's on Amazon. You can also get some more information and excerpts on it on my website. I have excerpts about the IMF and the World Bank evolution and how that impacts today, as well as all of the...
So this is a nonfiction. Didn't you just write a novel too?
Yeah, I'm just pumping them out, Alex.
Now I want to read this book. So tell me about it.
Well, actually, no, the thing is, this nonfiction came out of a scene in my novel Black Tuesday that was out a couple years ago, and there was a scene in it where the 6 bankers in 1929 got together at the Morgan Bank and figured out how to save themselves, and it didn't work so well, but all of those banks still exist today. So at the end of the day, we had a Great Depression. These banks survived, became bigger, and they are what they are today, J.P. Morgan, Chase, Citigroup, and so forth. So it kind of started with a novel, but All the President's Bankers is really my it was my way to use that little kernel and examine all of the relationships throughout all of the presidential libraries in the country over the presidents that have been presidents over the last 100 years, and the relationships with the 6 main bankers of the time, and look at how they coordinated what they wanted and needed from each other, and were the sort of mutually interdependent entities in Wall Street and Washington. There's no division. They're the same, components of the same political financial power structure, and how they operated. So there's a lot of documents in there that I examined through different archives. I didn't want anyone to say, oh, you're just talking about these people, it's a conspiracy. Well, it's not. I have all of the information. It's well documented in the book. There's 70 pages of footnotes that were kind of a real pain to put together. The footnotes are always the hardest part, and there's a lot of them, but it's really to show people there's real meat here. We're not just talking about this stuff. There's real...
This isn't our opinion. You know what's interesting?
Exactly, Alex. That's exactly right. Yeah.
I get real busy and thought this was a novel, and I had just said, please get Nomi Prince on about all the crises, but now that I know about this book, send me a copy. And come back on in like 2 weeks, and let's go over this book. This sounds powerful. Nomi Prince, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much, Alex. Take care.
Thank you. Wow, great lady. Just a great whistleblower. I mean, she was the top of her game, going up in the company, the very top, and she said, I'm not going to be part of this. This is evil. One of the first people warning of the derivatives from the inside back in the 2003, was it, she left? So, great lady. Now, I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., and I'll be well rested. I stayed up too late last night, and I was a little goofy today. I apologize for that. That happens occasionally. Sometimes it was good radio, but there's just so much insane, important news. It's up on Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.com. BAE's developing Google Glass spy app for spies. Of course they are. and a lot more. But the Nightly News is tonight at 7 o'clock. Great job, crew. I want to thank all of you out there that listen and our sponsors. God bless you all. Pray for peace in this country. Pray for non-offensive violence. Pray we don't have to defend ourselves, though, because we have a right and we will. Alex Jones here to tell you about how you can help spread liberty worldwide while also enjoying what I have found to be the best tasting 100% organic coffee on the planet. For more than a decade, my favorite coffee has come from the high